Welcome to Bunny Hugs and Mental Health, the podcast that deals with all things mental health. We talk to professionals, survivors, and loved ones about their sometimes informative, sometimes uplifting, and sometimes tragic stories. I'm your host of the show, Todd Runnebaum, advocate, recovering addict, experienced sufferer of depression and anxiety, and author of the children's book, Sometimes Daddy Cries. Hello and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. I am your host, Todd Runnebaum. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in for another week. And if it's your first time, hi, I'm Todd. I'm also sick right now. I'm getting snot all down my face and everything, so that's cool. Anyway, got another amazing episode for you this week. You know what? Check out last week's episode. I really want you to do that. It's not getting a whole lot of numbers right now. I don't know. I'm not sure why, but I spoke with CC Chang, and she was amazing. She has a really amazing company, so please check that out. And please check out next week. I'm speaking with a wonderful young lady, 23-year-old, I believe she is, Desiree. She was a dancer and a singer and a performer, and then she was in a very devastating car accident, and she now has, some PTSD issues. Her body doesn't work the way it used to, and she has some head injuries, so she's got short-term memory problems and all types of things, but we talk about her recovery and what life's looked like for her now and how she's enjoying life. So another really amazing young lady. But this week, I'm speaking to Mark Rizkallah. I got him from a mutual friend of ours now. He used to be just his friend. Now we're mutual friends through Ali Severino. Both are wonderful, wonderful people. But I'm just talking to Mark today, and he is the CEO of Tulua Health. It's an addiction and mental health treatment facility based in Santa Monica, California. And he's looking to become more active in speaking about new pathways to both mental health and addiction recovery through the use of psychedelics. Bum, bum, bum. Very controversial, but not really, because if it works, then, what the hell? If it works, it works. But this is different. Mark's way he uses it is very different than a lot of other types of psychedelic treatment. So I'm excited for you to hear it and how his treatment looks. Mark and I actually spoke for about 2 hours, so I had to do a lot of cutting, which was hard because it was such a good conversation. I actually feel like I have a forever bond with this young guy now. We kind of broke it out and had a really great conversation, and I hope we are in each other's lives more, and we stay in contact. Anyway, we also talk about some of the corruption behind treatment centers in the past. There's new laws now that kind of changed all that, but a lot of people are getting rich off addicts and then not dealers, treatment centers and things. So he discusses that and how that worked, and then we talk about his psychedelic treatment. Once again, hell of a guy. Great episode. So without further ado, I give you the CEO of Tulua Health, Mark Rizkallah.
Part of my background, when I first started kind of in mental health, I worked with schizophrenics, and that kind of was the beginning of respecting medication, right? Because before that, I had this idea that who the hell cares? These pharmaceutical companies are crap. They're just trying to make money. People don't really need them. And then I saw acute schizophrenia, and I realized, oh my God, medication helps these people kind of function, right? There is kind of that thin line between their life can't work and we turn them into zombies so they can have some normal life. But every once in a while, they come out with medications that work really well for people. And you find someone who came in who was completely messed up, hallucinations, audio, visual, all of it. And then they get on this medication within 30 days, they just become like everyone else. And those things kind of fade away. And it's amazing because now this person can go get a job. They can get their life together. So that was kind of, for me, the first introduction to medicine has its place. And it's a tool in the tool belt. Kind of like what we're touching on today with psychedelics. I'm not the kind of person who is like, I'm going to be in the woods every weekend, tripping on mushrooms and running around, because it's just a tool in the tool belt, right? It
Hmm.
can be used wrong, it can be used right, it can be overused, and that's not going to help anybody. So yeah, I think that medication gets kind of a bad flack, but I'll be honest with you, I'm grateful that we have things that we can turn to, especially kind of in acute situations, because if you have depression, anxiety, and it's super, you're having suicidal thoughts, it's super acute. It's amazing that we have something that you could take today that will help kind of buy you enough time to do the work in therapy, right?
Hmm.
Because that's really what you need is you need some time, you need time, and you got to buy yourself that time. But if your body is going through physical feelings, well, you're not going to sit there and talk to a therapist for an hour a couple times a week. It's not going to happen. You're going to
Hmm.
struggle with that. So that's kind of been my turning point early on in my career for medicine, and I see its place, and I'm grateful for that that extra thing in our tool belt. Imagine we're Batman and we got a little belt on, and we get all these tools we can use. That's one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I like, and it's a balance too, right? You don't want to rely all on one tool
Yeah.
or whatever. So, and even Western medicine compared to psychedelics or oh my god.
Holistic.
Yes, thank you. Holistic to
Yeah.
traditional or whatever. Yeah, it's a nice. You need that balance.
Yeah. I think after, my mom passed away like 3 years ago from cancer, and that was kind of the first time that I got kind of put into this idea that anxiety is in my life, but I didn't quite know or understand it. It was kind of like I was born in Lebanon. We left when we were young because there was a war going on. So we had bombs falling on our street. I come from that background, and I never, I'm very like stress averse. You can pile things on, and I'm like, everything's cool. We're moving forward, and that's how I've been my whole life, right? Um, but there were signs kind of in between that I was struggling with a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of depression once in a while, but I kind of just brushed them off and kept moving. And it wasn't until my mom passed, I think it was 2 years later, because even that, I kept going to meetings, I kept doing what I needed to do, and said goodbye to my mom, and that was hard, but I kept kind of doing what I was doing. And then one day I'm at a restaurant and I'm talking to someone, and all of a sudden everything goes tunnel vision for no reason, just tunnel vision. And I'm feeling lightheaded, like I'm going to pass out. And I'm sure now at this point there's some kind of medical problem happening with me, and I feel like I can't catch my breath. And so I kept it cool, went to the bathroom, washed my face. I'm like, what the hell's going on? What the hell's going on? Sure enough, that was the first panic attack I had. I'd never had one before. That was the very first one. Um, it's interesting, but the body has a way of keeping score, even if your mind is focused on something else. And then I looked at the time of year it was, and it was around the time of my mom's death anniversary. So
Hmm.
the body remembered this traumatic experience, even though my mind wasn't thinking about it. And so that was kind of the beginning of a really tough time for me and a journey. And then, to bring it back to touch on holistic medicine, for me, what really helped, especially in the early days, was valerian root.
Hmm.
And I still use valerian root. And it's interesting, not a lot of people talk about valerian root. They talk about ashwagandha, but only because it has some kind of effects for males, that could help with testosterone and this and that. So people like that. But valerian root acts similar on the body like a benzo, but not as strongly as a benzo. People say you don't have withdrawals from it, but that's a lie. I will tell you this: I've used it for 6 or 7 months. If you cut it cold turkey, you will go into withdrawals, and it's not as bad as a benzo withdrawal, but it does not feel good. You will have racing heart. You will have all of those effects. But using valerian root, I was able to sleep. I was able to reduce the instances of a panic attack. I haven't actually had one now in, I'd say, 6 or 7 months. um, it's tremendous how well it worked. So like I said, it's an extra tool. Now the real work is, getting with a therapist and working through what are the things that I thought were there or didn't know were there, but they're there. And they've been building now for 36 years. And here they are coming out, regardless if I want them out or don't. It
Hmm.
sucks. Getting old sucks. Yeah, getting
Yeah.
old sucks.
Yeah, I've been sober almost 6 years. I've been
Congrats.
thank you. I've been taking medication for 10. I've been seeing therapists off and on for like 10 or 12. And it was just this last spring that some icky stuff from my past came out, and I had to deal with it. It was
Yeah.
like, what the hell? I've been working on myself for over a decade, and
Yeah.
I'm in my mid 40s, and now this shit is starting to feel gross, and now I have to
Yeah.
deal with it. Like, what the hell?
Yeah. It sucks because you've been doing the work, right? You've been doing the right things and you figure you get there. But kind of as we peel back the layers, and like you said, I think the best thing is balance too, right? So I think sometimes, we could overcook it, with therapy. We can overcook it with these things. If you look at, like, I'm from the Middle East, if you look at traditionally kind of those areas, they've been through really traumatic experiences, but they kind of continue to function as if nothing's happened. Now, I don't think that ignoring it's a great idea, because I think at some point it will surface itself, and I believe a lot of older people struggle with depression, Middle Eastern people especially. When I look at that in the Middle East, because they don't go out much, they kind of isolate. They start to do things that don't seem like depression to them, but for us, we know, like, hey, those are probably symptoms of depression. So, but I also believe that if we talk about everything all the time, we'll kind of stumble onto things that we could have just brushed off, but now they become bigger things.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that it's good to balance between two, right? And then it's kind of crazy when you stumble across something that you had no memory of. I think that's kind of the strangest thing when I see in the kind of the clients that we work with at our program, when someone goes, "Oh my God, I was molested when I was 7," and you're like, you don't remember that? Not until this therapy session. I had no memory of it.
Hmm.
And it's crazy. So that's what, like you're saying, as you peel back the layers, there are things that happen to us as kids, and some of them might have seemed harmless or been harmless, but they had impact, and they seared the brain a little bit. And as you peel back the layers, you touch that point, you're like, ouch, what was that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you're doing the work, though. That's awesome.
Oh, thanks. And I mean, ultimately, it's for the good, right? It's like, it's good that this
Yeah,
stuff's coming out. It's
sure.
frustrating, but it's like, if I didn't do the previous 10 years worth of work, then I wouldn't be dealing with this now, and I wouldn't be, moving forward and being the best me I could be, I guess.
Yeah, 100%.
I suppose being from the Middle East too, like some of those older people that you're talking about, I suppose there's probably a lot of generational trauma too that's like almost passed down in DNA because of the constant battles there.
Yeah, yeah. I'll give you a good example. When there's a video or a couple pictures of me when I was being baptized in Lebanon, and my dad's, Middle Eastern Lebanese. My mom is Armenian, and so if you look at the Armenian side, nobody's smiling.
Hmm.
And it's the strangest thing, because, like, it's a happy moment, right? They're baptizing me. It's great. It's great. The other side is laughing and having a good time. See, the Armenian side, because of the genocide, because of that way of life, they're hardened people. So to make them smile or laugh, it takes like a lot to even make them, because the kind of life they had was very traumatic. From the very start, it was a fight, and it stayed a fight. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of see that. And then Lebanese people are a little unique. I would say that if you spend time, if you've ever been to Lebanon or visit, the people there are unique, because bombs could be falling, but they will still go to the nightclub.
Hmm.
Right? Because they've just learned to live in that state. And I think they do it the best out of any Middle Eastern place, because they've managed to say, okay, you know what? You guys are going to drop bombs, or wars are going to happen. They're never going to stop. But we just kind of want to enjoy our lives. So inside of all of that, we're going to continue to enjoy our lives. So I think as far as Lebanon goes, you see a little bit less of that, because they have a very party, relaxed outlook, even in hard times. But the surrounding areas, for sure. And I think in the Armenian culture, the older generation, you find much more trauma, much more serious people who don't laugh or smile as often, because of kind of what their life was like, and the generational stuff that was passed down from their grandma and her great grandparents, and so on and so on. Because, yeah, it was a traumatic experience for them.
You were talking about valerian root. I really don't know anything about that. Is that a psychedelic?
No, it's not at all. It's crazy, right? It's so interesting to me that not a lot of people know about it. I talk to people about it, and they're like, "What is valerian root?" And I have all these people struggling with anxiety, and the first thing they do is jump on a benzo. And I try to tell them, like, "Hey, look, benzos have their place, but if you're struggling with addiction, benzo doesn't have its place for you, because you have that addictive personality that's
Yeah.
going to lead you to trouble."
I know people that are
Don't
addicted to
go.
benzos.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of the people who come in in our program are not allowed to have benzos, not because we want to punish them, but because the idea is that once they start taking them, they usually speed up into the next thing. So valerian root acts on the body similarly to the way a benzo does. So it hits the same receptors. It just doesn't hit them as hard and as strong and drain out all the systems the way a benzo does. It's mostly safe. There aren't too much long use studies on them because we don't do on the west side. They don't do a lot of studies on things like this.
Hmm.
But herbalists have been using valerian root for a long time. And so if you're having anxiety or a panic attack, taking valerian root will definitely help. Now, again, I want to preface, I'm not a doctor. Everybody should check with their doctors before they do that. But you should do the research on valerian root because it's an incredible thing. And after I had COVID for the first time about a year ago, I got insomnia. This was, I thought, was isolated to me. It turns out that a lot of people got insomnia after COVID. It was one of kind of the strange symptoms of the virus that it impacted the brain in a weird way. And honestly, the only way I slept is a cocktail that involved valerian root. It actually put me out for 4 or 5 hours because without it, I'd wake up every 2 hours and I wasn't waking up groggy. I was waking up like ready to go. Like I had just slept 8 hours and it's time to party. And I was so confused, right? And that was leading to anxiety and all kinds of other issues around that because it's like, what's going on? Why am I not sleeping like a normal human? So yeah, valerian root's really, really great. It can, however, from what I've heard, and I haven't tested this, supposedly you will pop for benzos if you use it. So if you're in a program and you're being tested regularly and you don't want to be hot, make sure one, you talk to their doctor, let the team know, and then maybe you don't pop. I haven't tested myself. I probably should because I've been using it for 6 or 7 months. So I'd be a good candidate. That's the only downside. But outside of that, the only other thing is if you're using it regularly, when you want to get off, taper off. Because if you don't taper off, it will push you into a withdrawal and that'll make you feel icky.
I'm on a fixer, which is a pretty strong antidepressant, and I'm telling you, withdrawals of any kind of brain medicine is just fucking brutal. It's a nightmare.
It does. It's crazy how it makes you feel. I was explaining this to my wife, but like there's this feeling of like imminent death. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, like this immediate feeling that like something is very wrong, and it's going to be very wrong, and it's so strange because nothing's happening other than you've reduced the dose of the medicine you're taking.
Yeah.
It's just the scariest thing.
The last time I kind of lowered my dose with my doctor, he's like, "All right, we'll try it." Kind of thing. He was
Yeah,
reluctant,
yeah,
but I did it.
yeah.
Yeah, and I was having strong feelings, of imminent death and just lots of anxiety and stuff. And then I realized, oh, this is withdrawal. So even though I knew what it was, it didn't change the effect. I still had those feelings.
Yeah.
You think you'd be rational, like, oh, that's why I'm feeling this way is because I'm going withdrawal. But it's like, no, it's withdrawal, but it's still so very real.
So very real. It's unbelievable how real it is. And some of the research suggests that CBD, believe it or not, can help with withdrawals. And I was doing this without realizing it. I was using CBD at night when I'd wake up all panicky, hoping that it would just help me, not realizing one, I was having withdrawals, and that's why I was feeling this way. I thought it was attached to just my general anxiety. But the CBD was the thing because what it does is it calms the physical stuff. So the that racing heart feeling, I don't know about you, but it leads to so much more panic. Like it's unbelievable, right? Like your heart starts beating and you go, what the fuck is wrong with me? And then that leads to a racier heart. And so the CBD brings that down. And so when that comes down, you become a little bit more rational. The bad thoughts are still there, but at least the physical symptoms have kind of subsided a little bit. So I'm a fan of that. And I don't do weed. I've kind of stayed away from that my whole life. I've stayed away from those things. But CBD, if I use it too much, it does make me it makes my brain feel a little foggy. But if you're using it, so what I do is when I taper off, I'll reduce something like, say, my valerian, right? I'll take it one night, I'll skip the next night. On the night I skip, I'll use CBD. Then the following night, I'll use the valerian. And then the night I skip, I'll use CBD. So that's kind of how I counteract so that as I'm coming down, because I like to try to be as close to natural as I can be, as close to. Kind of like what you did. You're like, hey, I'm on this dose. I don't mind the medicine, but can I drop it down to this dose? Would it still have the same positive effect, but I have less chemical in my body? because that's kind of that sweet spot, right? Is like, what's the least I can consume and still have a good feeling.
Hmm.
So I'm trying to find that sweet spot too. I failed and went into withdrawals, but
Yeah, me
it's
too.
kind of it's a touch and go type thing. You have to just keep trying and figure out what works.
Yeah, I often wonder it like so then I bump up my meds again, and it's like, okay, what did I bump up my meds just to avoid the withdrawal, or because that was actual anxiety and I needed them? So anyway,
Y-
that's the
Yeah,
whole game, right? That we're living
yeah,
with.
yeah,
So are you what kind of education and training do you have? You said you're not a doctor, which I knew you weren't a doctor, but I'm just curious.
yeah, yeah. So I got a bachelor's degree in psychology when I graduated at Cal State Northridge in California, and originally I was going to go back for my master's to do therapy. My goal in life was to help people. I wanted to be able to help people, but at the same time, I want to be able to make money, right? I want the balance of both. I don't want to sacrifice one for the other, right? Like there are ways where I could have been a salesman. I talk really well and I could have made a ton of money. But the truth is I'm not helping nobody and I know that. So I couldn't do that. I really wanted to help people, but in all of those professions, you don't make much money. And so trying to survive, especially in California with a family, I have three little girls, it's tough, right? So I saw that. I went to work at a place called La Casa originally, which was a 180 bed subacute facility, locked 4 units, real acute schizophrenia. And that's when I noticed that therapists are overworked and underpaid. Like immediately, I was like, "Oh, how much do you make? 55,000." But you work nonstop while we're here. You deal with the client and you do like paperwork stacks that are like, humongous, right? I mean, literally, it's sad. 70% of the time with the client is actually filling out papers because they're funded by DMH and they need the funding, but DMH won't give it to them unless they're doing all this paperwork. It's like the stupidest thing. So when I saw that, I'm like, oh no, I don't want to do this. And I love helping people, but I can't make $50,000 a year and actually function as a human. It won't work, right? So at that time, my wife she's a nurse. She has a BSN, and she was working for Passages in Malibu, which is this big treatment center. They used to promote that they had a cure for addiction, right? The owner's son was an addict, and he's on the commercials, and now he's cured, which I don't necessarily think he's cured, but let's say he's cured. He takes boat trips randomly for like months at a time. I don't know.
I'd be
Comes
cured
back and
too.
makes, yeah, exactly. Comes back and makes cuckoo decisions that don't make sense unless you're in early recovery, right? Because your decision making isn't that good. But anyway, so Pastors, aside from the ownership, the company itself was great. The therapists were amazing. They were looking for someone to oversee their housing programs. And so I was like, you know what? I'm ready to not commute 2 hours a day, 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening because I lived in the valley and drove to Long Beach, which was nightmare. Let's try it, and working with addicts would be new at the time. And I was like, well, maybe I'll like it. What was crazy is looking back, the working at La Casa prepped me for working with addicts, right? Because when you work with such a high acuity of mental illness, this is less. Your brain can process it better, right? So it was easier. I slotted in at Passages and I quickly fell in love with addicts. Like I was like, oh my God, like I love this, right? And I never viewed myself because in the industry, right, I'm considered a normie. So when people see me, they go, oh, you're a normie. You haven't been addicted to substances. I'm just like, I'm a human. I can probably rattle off 5 things to you that I'm addicted to. Some of them are probably inappropriate, so I don't want to say them out loud, but I'll tell you
Oh,
one, video games, right? Video games for sure. I play, and this is going to sound stupid, right? I'm a 36-year-old grown man, but video games was my generation, right? So I'll play, I mean, I honestly I could play 8 hours a day. If you let me, I'll do it, right? I remember my wife at one point was like, listen, if you keep playing at the rate you're playing, I don't know if we can keep going because I don't have a partner. You're not here. You're here, but you're not here. And so I understand addiction, right? I always tell parents when they call me, oh, like, can you help my son? He's got this heroin addiction and I don't understand why he keeps using. And I'm like, ma'am, do you drink coffee every day? She's like, of course. Yeah, I drink coffee. I said, great. Tomorrow I want you to stop drinking coffee. She's like, well, I can, but I don't want to. Well, that's silly, right? You can, but you don't want to because the truth is most people drink coffee. Most people are addicted. And if they stopped cold turkey, they would go into full withdrawals.
hmm.
I know I did that. It was a horrible mistake. It's a horrible mistake. But it sent me, depending on the level of caffeine you drink, it sent me into a full full withdrawal. But I always tell people, human beings are all the same in the idea that we're all suffering and struggling with something, and we all have addictions that we're using to cope with, right?
Hmm.
And so, yes, addicts are unique in that they're using these chemicals, right? But I have electronic addictions with people, right? There are porn addictions most men are struggling with. There are all kinds of addictions. So for me, understanding addicts was easy. It was just understanding a human, right? You're searching for a release from the things that you're struggling with. So that's kind of why I really fell in love working in addiction. And from there, I got a director position at a company called Convalo at the time, which is now called Boulevard, but back then it was called Convalo. Now, Boulevard has a bad reputation. I always say Convalo because I worked there when it was a corporate company. And I was at the last corporate location before we closed and sold it off. Now, after we sold it off to people like a Subway type deal. I was no longer involved with the company. I had moved on. And one of the locations got raided by the FBI because the woman who bought it was doing body brokering, right? I'm sure you kind of know about that.
Mm-mm.
Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit too. It's an interesting thing. It's kind of a double-edged sword in treatment, right? Because what ended up happening is it happened in Florida first, where people were getting clients, paying the client money to send them to a detox, right? Now, the detox owner a lot of times had no idea that was happening, or sometimes they did. But the idea was, hey, your policy could potentially make me $80,000 for your 30-day stay. So I pay this kid 10 grand. Well, hey, I lose 10K, but I make 70. Now, how do I get clients outside of that? Well, the old school way we used to get clients was business to business relationships, right? We have a business development team. They would go shake hands, talk to other people, other facilities, and we'd get referrals, and it would just kind of go like that, referrals. And then digital marketing happened, and digital marketing was big. But for a while, what was happening is these kids who were newly sober would get a hotel room, right? They'd buy drugs, get a bunch of kids to come there, use drugs, and then they would sell them to a treatment center.
Hmm.
Horrible.
No.
I mean,
Yeah.
just
That's.
horrible. So Florida got like annihilated. I mean, decimated by this. The feds raided most facilities, and they did it badly because what they did was they thought they were going to stop the fraud, but what they did was punish the addicts because all of a sudden all these treatment centers were closed and clients couldn't get help.
Right.
So they ruined it. In California, I think, and I could be wrong, it still could happen, but the feds passed a federal law because they realized once they shut down Florida, all those bums moved from Florida to California and started doing the same exact thing. So the feds didn't want to come and blow up California the way they did in Florida. And I think it's smart because they ruined an entire business that helped people. They made a federal law. So now body brokering is a federal law. And if you are selling a client, and it made it really weird for us now. So it's like, okay, wait, can I hire somebody who goes out and does marketing? Yes, you can, but you have to pay them a reasonable salary. Okay, fine. What they were doing before was they were paying people per policy. This is so stupid, right? But this is what this girl was doing, and she got caught because she was sending text messages to everybody doing dumb shit. But it was something like, oh wait, you sent me these 4 policies. These 2 Uniteds pay really well, so I'll pay you 5,000 for those, but I'm only going to give you 2,000 for these Anthems because they don't pay well.
Jesus.
Jesus, right? Like this is what it became. And so, they raided her place, shut her down. I think she's going to get indicted. I don't know if she's going to serve any time. Sometimes for stuff like this, they kind of just slap you on the wrist and say, "Look, stay out of the business. Don't come back in. If you come back in, we're gonna ruin your life."
Right.
But it scared people enough that it's slowed down today, right? We don't see it as often, which is great. But it messed up our business because business to business relationships became hard to establish again because people were used to being paid to do something.
Hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like all of a sudden we're saying, hey, we'll refer you guys clients if you refer us some. And then, they want a little kickback. Or you work with a lab and the lab is like, oh, well, if you use our services, we'll give you some money. And you're like, whoa, that's illegal, dude. I don't want any of your money. But 5 years ago, if you looked at the industry, there were all these people who got filthy rich off of the kickbacks, man. They would
Damn.
make $200,000 a month off of getting these facilities to work with this lab because the lab was billing something like $1,100 a UA 3
Good
times a
Lord.
week. I mean, it's insane. It's so
Capitalism.
bad that yeah, right. It's exact. It's like the capitalism multiplied because what you had is guys in early recovery, so they weren't making clear decisions. They were making just money decisions, right? It was just money. And so it kind of spiraled. And then that hurt us because the insurance companies got pissed off and started reducing their reimbursement rates. So today we're seeing 30% reimbursement. So if I bill your insurance for a service and I bill this number, they're only giving me 30% of that number. So that
Right.
made it hard for good companies to function because it costs us a lot of money to hire therapists, doctors, nurses, and everything else like that. So it's kind of a process, right? So we got decimated in that way, and that sucks for us because, like I said, it costs a lot of money to get professionals to provide a good service. And not only that, but we want to be able to keep clients in the program longer, right? And the insurance company will allow us to bill for something like maybe 90 days,
Right.
which sucks because who gets better in 90 days?
Well, I did a 28-day program, and that was all. The 28-day program was all based around insurance and
That's
insurance
it.
companies and how long they'll insure you
Right.
for.
It's
So,
heartbreaking. It's a
yeah.
double-edged sword, and I wish that both sides could sit down and talk and say, look, we'll charge you a fair rate for all of our services. You pay us a fair rate for those services. Let's cap how many times a client can go to treatment annually so that they don't just treatment hop, right?
Hmm.
But at the same time, you have to understand that a part of recovery, part of addiction is slipping up. So some clients need multiple times before they understand it. But let me tell you something, it would help if I could keep you in my program for 1 year, right?
Hmm.
Because in 1 year, not only could I give you groups and therapy and all that good stuff, but I can help you get a job, make sure that that's handled for a little while so you get back on your feet and then you go. Well, I mean, the insurance company tells me something silly like this. Well, you can't use the insurance money to pay for a client's sober living bed. Okay, cool. Great. All right, so let's do a scenario here. Heroin addict, 21 years old, been using since 12, is homeless, lives in a tent, comes to get help, has not a penny to his name or her name. What do I do? What do I say? Okay, you know what? Keep living in the tent, but every day make sure you come in to get your therapy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
That-
ludicrous.
yeah.
It's ludicrous. And in Florida, people got in trouble for sober living stuff, for paying for the beds. And it's like, no, but there's no other way for the client to get help. So how, so for us at our sober living, we charge $500 a month for rent. And what we say is, hey, look, you have to pay us this money. There's no way around it. But you don't have to pay it all up front. You can take your time, you can make payments to us, but by law, we have to charge you this money. And it sucks, but this is what it is. I think it's good for a client to know that that's there, that they can get the help, but that they need to pay something back. They do usually get general relief, and that helps them. But the system is so silly because it kind of puts them on the back foot. And in 90 days, I'm looking at the client like, hey, look, you're at OP now. I'm going to keep you longer than anyone else would because most people don't even want to do OP because the reimbursements are low. They just kick people out. But I say, hey, stay an extra 2 months, get a job, get yourself together, right? And that's hard to do as a company because it gets into your bottom line. And ultimately, you're doing both things, right? You're helping people and you have a business. The business has to succeed in order for you to help people. You can't
Right.
do
Yeah.
one without the other, right?
What does
And so that's
OP
kind
stand
of
for?
OPs, outpatient.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So there's usually 3 levels of
Of
care.
course. Right.
Let's say you have detox and residential, that's inpatient, right?
Yeah.
At outpatient, we have 3 levels of care. One is PHP, which is partial hospitalization. One is IOP, which is intensive outpatient, and one is outpatient. PHP is 5 days a week, 6 hours a day. IOP is 3 or 5 days a week, but only 3 hours a day. And OP is 2 times to 3 times a week for 1 hour each.
Gotcha.
So usually what that means is you came in kind of acute,
Mm-hmm.
and then you got to a place where you're not acute or as acute, so now you can function in society on your own, which,
Right.
as you and I both know, 3 months, that's bullshit. Yeah, we got them to a good place, not a good enough place to be on their own. And what's causing multiple relapses is at that point we're DCing the client to another system, and that system is failing them and they're relapsing again.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a tough balance between not. I understand the insurance company's perspective. I get that they don't want to pay for this forever. But if they just said, look, we will cover you for a 6 month window at a fair rate so that you can find good help, because who else is helping? I mean, the state is barely helping. They have programs, but they're literally shit because they pay $80 a day a client. Who the hell can hire high quality therapists, doctors, and everything else.
Yeah.
Food, a clean facility that looks nice, not just like a place that looks like an insane asylum, like a nice facility where people feel comfortable because your surroundings matter, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you feel like shit internally and you walk into a center that looks like shit, well, now the outside and the inside are the same. That's bad. It's not good,
That's the
right?
kind of place I went to.
You went to a state-run place.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know if there are any private ones in the province. Like I'm in Saskatchewan, Canada, in the province of Saskatchewan.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So our the one I went to and I ended up working for a couple of years. It's called a CBO, or community based organization. So
Cool.
it's not state run, but it's state funded or
Yeah,
province funded.
yeah,
And like the counselors there make almost half as what they would if they actually worked in healthcare as a counselor.
yeah.
There's a lot of passionate people that work there, but it is,
Sure. You don't have the resources.
yeah, yeah, and it was old school. I mean, it was like counselor in your face yelling at you kind of place. Like it's old
Oh my
school.
God. Yeah,
Um,
that's
but
the hard way.
yeah, and we found that we would get clients that went to detox, then they got
Hmm.
recommended to come to us or
Yeah,
referred, but then they would leave. Quite often, they would leave detox because we had such a long waiting period. So there were people like relapsing between detox and
yep,
treatment. So then that throws a
yeah,
monkey wrench into things, and then same thing after 28 days, it's like boom, bye, and then
yeah,
they're going right back to their using
yeah,
friends or their spouse that's abusing them or
yeah,
whatever, and boom, they just go right
yeah.
back into it.
Yeah, it's really strange. It's like there is funding coming out for it, but of course it's kind of being mismanaged. In California we have, big homeless issue. We
Hmm.
also have lots of money funding the taking care of homeless people, but
Hmm.
yet we still have a homeless issue. So this is something that, if we're mismanaging the funds, if everyone's starting a program to help people is just absorbing that money and not helping anybody, well, it
Hmm.
doesn't work, right? So for us, with our company, we're trying to work in the States first, and then we're trying to go out of the States to different countries to provide kind of this kind of model that is not state style, that is nice. Our program, Tulua Health in Santa Monica, is is in a facility that looks like it's a lounge, like it's
Right.
beautiful. And when you walk in there, you're happy to be there, right? You look around, you go, this is beautiful, right? We have a chef who cooks food, right? Not because we're uppity, but because in my household, all the good stuff happened around food, right? Like, all the good talks with mom and dad was around that. And so what do we have during lunchtime when everybody comes out of group? Guess what? The chef is there with food and she's hanging out talking to all of them, and they're all having a great time. That's part of the healing, right?
Hmm.
It's not
Hmm.
just the group therapy and the individual therapy that's going to help, but it's the environment you're building in your program.
Hmm.
Now that environment becomes easier to build when you have money.
Yeah.
When you don't have money, then you have a bunch of disgruntled staff who, yes, they want to help, but they themselves are living in financial hardship. So how could they help? If they're struggling, how could they give all of themselves?
Yeah.
It becomes very challenging to do so, right? So that's why it's been our goal is to try to become, you know, we'll start in the States where we can be the most profitable as a company, because then we know that with that backbone, we can then go help in places that we're not going to make much money, but it's okay. The company can absorb those hits. That's our goal, right? Because I've realized in life, in my path of trying to help people, you don't get anywhere without money. It's really hard. Mother Teresa is Mother Teresa, but at the end of the day, if you really want to help people, you need to have money, because you need to be able to provide good services, not just services, not crappy services, but you need to pay good therapists who can really dig down deep. And I think that kind of circles back into the psychedelics, right? Because before that, the route was longer. I feel like without psychedelics, the route is always going to be longer. So you're going to do therapy for the next, who knows, let's say 10 years to dig down into some of these issues. And one of the reasons why I got attached right away to psychedelics and the idea is that when someone, like, for example, let's use MDMA, because it's probably going to be the most popular one. It's MDMA and psilocybin are going to be the top two that are used around the world for sure. They're used now, but right now it's kind of more like a spiritual thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to make it more of like a
Medicinal.
yeah, I want you to be in a good setting when we do it, right? But I don't want somebody chanting in the background. Like, I want to talk about your childhood. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want you to be on MDMA and I want you to tell me about your childhood. I want to dig into it because when you're on MDMA, you open up in a way that you can't open up when you're not, right? There are these chemical releases happening in the brain that are they're reducing the fear side and they're increasing the serotonin and dopamine side. So you're connecting with whoever's in the room with you. And when you're accessing trauma, it's almost like you're in one room and the trauma is in the other room and you're just looking at it from a distance as opposed to, hey, can you tell me something about your childhood that was traumatic? You're going to go, oh shit, you're going right back into that place. And that we're reopening traumas to try to solve them. But when you're using the MDMA, we're doing an 8-hour therapy session. I mean, we're
Right.
not talking about a 1 hour session. We're talking about an 8-hour session.
Yeah.
That's
That makes
insane,
sense.
right?
That makes
Right?
sense.
But
It's like you do MD, oh my God, that drug. And then
MDMA.
as it's hitting, you're like, your session's over.
Could you imagine? No, yeah.
Yeah.
So we would, all of the studies that were done to get it to the phase 3 clinical trials, which is incredible. I think most people don't realize that we've gotten to that place, that the FDA has gotten to the place where they're allowing this thing, because this was a Schedule 1 drug. This is like you get caught with it, you're in deep shit. And now they're saying, hey, we're in phase 3, and they're wrapping up phase 3. I don't see why by summertime we don't see an approval by the FDA so that we can begin allowing pharmaceutical companies to produce the compounds we need so that we can use them. 8-hour sessions spread across 3 months. They're showing a 60% reduction in scores for trauma, depression across treatment resistant people. Meaning they took like the worst ones, the ones that were doing treatment and getting no love, no support, no help, regardless of what was given to them, and they're seeing a 60% reduction in their scores for their traumatic experiences, for depression, for anxiety. It's incredible, right? So it's doing 10 years of therapy in 3 months.
Hmm. And you think this is more effective than, say, methadone or Suboxone or?
Yeah, I think it's a completely different category, right? So when we look at Suboxone, and I was an early adopter of Suboxone in LA, you couldn't find a treatment program if you were on Suboxone that would take you out here. But when I was with Convallo with Boulevard, my treatment program there, we took people on Suboxone. And people called us a flop for doing that, by the way. They said, you guys are a flop, you're just doing it for the money. Today in LA, in California, you can't deny somebody treatment based on their medication, which is beautiful. So now everybody takes Suboxone, right? Now the thing is with Suboxone is its main purpose is just to help you come off the opiates, right?
Yeah.
It gives your body that little bit to not go back to using the opiates, and it blocks the opiate if you try to use it.
Right.
Here's the shitty thing now, though. Suboxone is not effective with fentanyl.
Hmm.
And all of the opiates today, most people are using fentanyl.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
Suboxone does not block the effect of the fentanyl. So now we got to go back to the drawing board and start again. Is it a good tool for harm reduction? Yes.
Right.
Right? It's saying, hey, look, you shoot up heroin every day. Well, let me get you one step away from that. Let's get you on Suboxone. Let's ride that out for the next 3 months and let's see how that looks.
Right.
The withdrawals off Suboxone are really horrendous. They're almost worse than the heroin from what I've heard from the clients.
Really?
So you want to, yes. So you want to taper that over a long period of time. And look, I always tell the clients, if you're on 2 milligrams of Suboxone for the rest of your life, but you're not shooting dope, you're going to school, you got a career, you're building your life, you got a family, who the hell cares?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But there's a lot of stigma around that in LA. And if you go to programs, AA programs and NA programs, they're very judgmental about Suboxone. And they don't consider you clean if you're taking Suboxone.
Right. Yeah.
Which is heartbreaking for people because they're dealing with their addiction plus the judgment of this group of people who they need love and support from.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, psychedelics is on a whole nother realm. That was a band-aid. Psychedelics can become a way for us to dig down into the trauma and alleviate it, right? Because I'm a big believer that mental illness is the first issue. And then the substance abuse or any other issue attached to that is just a side effect of the mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the mental illness probably started because of some, either you have a chemical balance and or, which is most of the people in treatment, trauma in early childhood, right? I mean, 9 out of 10 patients have non-existent parents or family, or parents who are the biggest piece of shit on the planet because they also were struggling with addiction or their issues,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So they were not there to take care of the child, right? So the child then went and found other people, and typically when you're lost and confused as a young person, you're easily influenced. And all of us have been approached by someone who wants to give them drugs, or been in a situation where people are doing all these things and you have to decide yes or no. I had parents who allowed me and trusted me and give me space and loved me. So for me, no was an easy answer. But if my parents were pieces of crap, no offense to the parents who suck out there, or maybe offense to the parents who suck out there, your child is going to say yes because they want to feel like they fit in somewhere. Right. So it's not like a mystery, right? This is the beginning of that. The mental illness starts with the trauma early on, and then the side effect is substance abuse.
Right. And that trauma isn't always from the parents either.
No,
Right.
no,
So,
100%.
yeah.
But the
You can
reason
have an
I
addicted child and not be a piece of shit parent.
true, true. I will say that that's happened with people who've gotten into injuries and had excessive pain and then went down the oxy route.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have
Mm-hmm.
seen that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you this, I've seen most people happen, and it's the weirdest thing because I've seen it happen with parents who care too much but have no boundaries for their child.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this makes you feel good? Great, let's do that. Or this is good for you? Great, let's try that. Let's do whatever you want. And those kids are equally as bad as the kids whose parents were nowhere around. So yeah, I say that you're right in some instances because I've seen the people who started with oxy and then turned full blown heroin because the oxy is expensive, and when you can't afford the oxy, the heroin is cheap. Contrary to what we see in movies, heroin is not that expensive, and oxys is way more expensive. So yes, in those cases, you're right. The parents are great, have been great most of the kid's life. The person turned into an adult potentially, had some kind of really bad accident, is struggling with daily pain, which is a horrible thing to wake up and know that something is hurting you every day.
Mm-hmm.
Oxy is the release from that. Suboxone is the release from that. And I've seen people go into full-blown heroin addiction off of that. Yes, 100%.
Mm-hmm. So the way you use the psychedelics, it's for the therapy sessions. Like you're not prescribing it for long term or anything like that.
No, right now it's still so early that we haven't built the protocols around it. But from what I'm seeing, because for example, right now in LA, you can get ketamine therapy.
Right.
And ketamine is a version of a psychedelic, but the way it's being done is not.
It's more spiritual again.
It's more spiritual, and or it's more like, hey, come into the office, put on these headphones, we're going to put something on TV, here's a nasal thing, or here's an IV drip, sit out and vibe out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What the hell is that doing for the person? I mean, if you have acute suicidal person, ketamine's amazing for stopping that immediately. So if you told me today, I'm going to go hang myself, I'm done, I will give you ketamine and it will change that instantly. But the reason you wanted to hang yourself in the first place is still there. We haven't lost that. So with ketamine right now, there are some training programs coming out that are allowing for lozenges, which is like a Halls, and training the therapist to work through a long 6-hour session, 2 therapists tag teaming with the patient. And usually these sessions would happen maybe once a month, maybe twice a month. I mean, they're not all the time. So the whole idea is to get you to a place where you can view kind of yourself from a different perspective almost, right? One of my therapists who went through MAPS, and MAPS is one of the biggest ones. Rick Dobbin's he's been on Joe Rogan, he's been on everything. He's the one who's kind of been pushing psychedelics forward. So really grateful for him. MAPS, their program's great. One of my therapists went through their program, and he told me about a woman who lost her family in a car accident. She was driving the car. Everyone died but her, which is like, I mean, it's a horrible I mean, that's
Everyone's nightmare.
everyone's nightmare. Yeah. If you have a family, that's your fucking nightmare. Is you cause the accident, everyone dies, you live.
Yeah.
So they got her on MDMA and they were watching these recordings of her and the sessions, and she was able to relive the moment from an outside perspective, right? Because
Hmm.
before that, every moment she relived in there was from inside. I'm here, it's my eyes, I'm seeing it, and I caused it. Now she was kind of like pushed out of her body and experienced it from a different perspective and understood that she didn't cause the accident and that she can kind of release herself from that. And that was huge because this woman was en route to, potential suicide or treatment the rest of her life and never finding peace from this incident.
Right.
What the sessions gave her was some peace about it. And then there's the spiritual element that kind of makes you realize that there's more to life than just the physical form.
Hmm.
And I think that is huge for accepting that, like, okay, it's okay because there's more to it. I mean, we saw psilocybin, LSD being used for terminally ill cancer patients or terminally ill patients in general, and huge acceptance with the idea of death because they were able to see the world kind of like the background behind me,
Hmm.
as opposed to I'm Mark and now Mark is stopping, it ceased to exist anymore. I don't even know what that means. And so you kind of have these two things working to help the patient kind of accept the world or see the world differently, and then look at their trauma differently and share their trauma without any pain.
I'd say see the universe differently, not
See
just the
the universe
world.
differently. Right. And then there's no, you can speak openly, and I don't have to go through 10 sessions before you tell me, yes, my neighbor, he was kind of weird. And then we need another 10 sessions for you to explain why your neighbor
Yeah.
was weird and what that really means.
Right. Yeah. Um, so are in these sessions, are the people just mildly dosed, or are they like, as I would say, tripping balls?
No, they're tripping. No, they're
Oh,
tripping.
okay.
Yeah, they're dosed well, and look at some of the studies that have been done. For example, there was a huge study done on psilocybin where they dosed people like, people take an eighth of mushroom to get high on the street. That's kind of the norm, right? If you want to trip, you take an eighth. They dosed at like 10 milligrams and then went up from there, which is like a really small microdose,
Right.
because they're looking at the idea of microdosing for depression.
Right.
And a microdose is something you shouldn't even feel. You don't
Hmm.
feel the effect of the mushroom,
Hmm.
but you feel happier, right?
Right.
Mushrooms gives you that feeling of euphoria that is like, oh wow, oh man, look at that tree, look at those colors. Like, wow, the world is, as my friend put it, it feels, when I went outside, it felt like the sun was hugging me,
Hmm.
right? And so they tried these different doses, and they found that in the kind of middle range doses and in the high doses, there was adverse effects too, right? So yes, they want to dose you enough so that you're hallucinating a little bit, but it's still so early that we haven't developed what those protocols look like. And it's people like me who own these businesses, that's going to do that realistically through the therapist, because we're going to record what it looks like when someone takes this much or that much, because everybody is different. And I think this has been the biggest sticking point for psychedelics, is that I have no idea what it's going to do in your body.
Right.
Just like I have no idea what it's going to do in that guy's body or that girl's body. That's the scariest part. And this is why, for example, LSD, which has been around for a long time. I mean, they've been working on LSD since the 40s, maybe even sooner, but let's say around the 40s, 1940s.
They did a lot of that in Saskatchewan here.
There you go. So yeah, there was a lot of, in America, it wasn't as much, but in Europe and everywhere outside of America, they were doing all of these studies on it, and it was incredible. And they found some people would get like wild sexual arousal. I mean, how the hell am I going to talk to you about anything if you're wildly sexually aroused, right? Or there was some people that it took up to 30 sessions before the LSD actually worked.
Hmm.
They found that regardless of dosage, they could give you a little bit or a lot, and it didn't change. What they found was that people who were resistant needed to do something like 30 sessions before it actually worked. So when you look at that's a wide range. So when you look at that, you kind of go, okay, I can see why it took so long to bring it out to the forefront. And yeah, the drug, getting it as a Schedule 1 drug made it harder for us to bring it forward. But there was also this idea that it's going to impact everybody differently. So we're going to have a good screening process as to who is going to be utilizing this. And we say treatment resistant, but I'm going to tell you something. I work with a population that's 18 to about 32. All of them are multiple offenders. All of them are treatment resistant. There is rarely an addict in the world today that is not treatment resistant. They're probably on the 30th time or the 20th time or the 15th time, because it's hard. It's hard to surrender all of that when we haven't resolved the underlying issues to begin with. All we've done is give you some support and some therapy, and that's great.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, you're still feeling the things you're feeling kind of behind the scenes because the real trauma was hard for you to access. And so with these drugs, we're hoping to be able to do that. And I think MDMA, honestly, has probably the best chance, because I don't know if you know anyone who's took MDMA and had a bad time. I don't know if that exists.
Yeah.
I don't think that exists. I think it's used at raves for a reason, which, by the way, was part of its downfall. When people started using it to party, the DEA was like, well, what is this thing? This shit's showing up everywhere now. We need to do something about it. It's a problem. But it makes you feel good. And so I think that that's going to be the leading one. I think psilocybin is going to come in right after that. And psilocybin in 2023, Oregon is going to allow treatment centers to open utilizing psilocybin.
And doesn't Colorado, isn't it already like
Colorado,
legal?
so they've decriminalized it, but you cannot use it for treatment yet. But they're going to allow in Oregon. I think Colorado's next. So we're starting to see that. Now, here's the scary part. There are going to be good people who are going to do this, and then there are going to be money hungry people who do this. And that's where we're going to start seeing some really, really screwy shit happen in this space. And I hope that people are afraid to enter the space as business people. I hope that they're afraid, because that will slow down that screwiness for the people who are really trying to do it, like our company that's going to be doing it the correct way. I hope that it slows it down, because I can imagine if they treat it like they've treated treatment, oh man, it's going to be a shit show. You know what I mean? There's going to be people, because with these psilocybin doses, they found the middle range and high range that I'd say 5 out of, like, I think it was 80 subjects, and 7 in the high dose range had suicidal ideations. I mean, immediately. Right? That's scary. If you don't have the right setup to help these people, imagine we do a session and then we test you and you're like, yeah, I'm feeling a little suicidal. And then we don't have anything to do with you after.
Mm-hmm.
And we just say, okay, well, let's stick around here for a little bit. Let's see what happens. I mean, it's going to be bad, and it's going to be a bad name for the psychedelic world. So I hope that we're going to get to some licensing eventually, because initially there won't be much licensing around it, like everything else, but eventually we'll have to probably get through some licensing to be able to provide the service. Right now it'll probably be something like you need a doctor, but I don't know if you know doctors that you can just give money to and they'll do things, because some of them do that, right? That's a real thing, right? Part of the problem we have with oxys is there was a lot of doctors going, oh yeah, here, oxys for everybody. So it's a little bit scary in that way, for sure. I think that's one of the pitfalls to what's happening. And then I think there's also the people who are going to do it with the shaman spiritual side.
Yeah.
Which, again, I got no beef with that, right? But I know a lot of people who've done it and their life hasn't changed at all, right? They went to see a shaman, they did the session, and then they go back once a year because they need a booster for it. You know what I mean? It's like it hasn't changed them, because there was no therapy going alongside with it. You have to have that. If you don't have that, psychedelics will not make your life that much better.
Right. Again, it's balance. It's like, okay, yeah, you trip balls and you have this cool spiritual journey.
Yeah.
But you're still hanging on to old trauma and stuff, whereas having therapy, it's like you're getting rid of the trauma and that. Plus, you're having a bit of spiritual. Mm-hmm. Plus, you're in a safe place and all this stuff. So
exactly, all that stuff together is important.
Who would not be allowed to do something like this? Like I've read that people that are on SSRIs or SRRIs, like it's not a good idea to do.
Yeah, so there are some instances where what we would do is taper somebody off of the SSRIs over the course of 30 days while we prep them for the sessions with the psychedelics, because the SSRIs act as a block. So what ends up happening is it blocks the psychedelic from working effectively. So you won't have the same effect because of the SSRI. So yes, what I think would have to happen is a detox from the SSRIs,
Ugh.
and that would be at least a 30-day process, maybe longer depending on how long you've been taking them, and then you would roll into the sessions with these with MDMA or with psilocybin. And again, the cool thing is that it could potentially keep you off SSRIs.
Right, right.
So imagine doing 3 months of a program and never going back to taking SSRIs. Again, not that they're like horrible for you. I know they have a lot of flack in the news out here today because of some of the shootings. They'll say, oh, this mass shooting, oh, this guy was on SSRIs. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, he wasn't happy. So it's not like he was a happy dude, but SSRIs are great and they do help a lot of people. I just think it would be really cool if we can get to a place where if we solve the issue, we don't need the extra medicine. I think that's cool. And I think that's why I invite the pharmaceutical company in. Everyone's like, oh, we should keep it all natural. And I'm like, no, fuck that. It's not going to get anywhere unless the pharmaceutical companies come in and they're going to push legislation to say insurance needs to cover this and we're going to produce the drug. And then that way they surrender the SSRI because they're not going to give up the SSRI for
exactly.
nothing. You know what I mean? It's not going to work like that.
It's a business, for God's sake.
It's a business. It's a business that helps people but makes them money. That's fine. I don't mind. Whatever. Do what you do. I still have a choice whether I want to take or not take something. But at least if they come in, we can surrender SSRIs to some extent, and you might not need them anymore because you're feeling good enough after this session with the MDMAs.
I know lots of people that they do it on their. They do it on their own, man. It's like, sure, man, I just tripped with my buddy and and then, and again, good for them. I also worry, again, they're not getting the therapy part out of it. And people swear by all types of things. I swore by marijuana. It's helping me, man. I was smoking, endless amounts daily. It's like, oh, maybe it isn't working if I'm not even getting high anymore. And and then once you go off it, you realize, oh, my anxiety, 90% of my anxiety was caused by my marijuana use. But
by your marijuana, yes.
So I'm guessing you don't recommend people taking psychedelics on their own and trying to do it on their own and swearing by.
This is a tricky thing because most of the people pushing psychedelics are like hippies who love psychedelics, right? So I'm grateful. I'm so grateful for them. But I've heard Rick Doblin, and again, the guy's brilliant. I mean, without him, we wouldn't be where we are. But I've heard him say something like, I mean, psychedelics aren't addicting. And
I've heard that too.
I thought to myself, hold on a second here. I knew guys who were taking MDMA every fucking weekend, right? Like, there's no fucking way. It may not be addicting as in chemically, sure. But when something makes you feel good, it's addicting. Yeah. You want to do it again and again. Look, I play video games because when I shoot somebody in the head, I get a satisfaction. There's a satisfaction that comes with my ability to do this thing. That's like, oh my God, that was a great headshot. What a good job. My brain the dopamine is being pumped, right? I mean, it's just a video game, but it feels good. So guess what? I do it all the time, right? So I do believe there is a dangerous side to MDMA and all those things in that it's going to make you feel good. And so because of that, you're going to do it regularly. Now, there are going to be groups of people that have great restraint. Part of the reason why I didn't do drugs is because I have zero restraint. I have when I like something, I obsess. I'm all over it. That's who I am, right?
I hear you, brother.
Yeah, exactly. I recognize that very early about myself. So I think that in a controlled setting, in a safe space for a short duration, it's going to, and all the work you have to do around it. So I'm not just saying, let's take MDMA and just lounge around. I'm saying, let's do MDMA and then let's do hard work. So your brain is not going, oh, MDMA is a party. Your brain is going, okay, we got to really, we're going to do a lot of work here. Right. So I think in that setting, it's not going to cause addiction. But I think if people are just doing it casually, yeah. One of my closest friends loved MDMA. I mean, loved it. He was using it every weekend because life felt so much better when he was on MDMA. Was he getting enlightened by life? I mean, he heard music differently, right? He recognized music sounded weird, like almost like he could see the waves, right? That's cool, you know. I know people who've taken DMT and had great spiritual awakenings. What really pisses me off is then they go back to acting like assholes. So I don't know if the effect is going to be the same in that way. I think ultimately humans are going to default to certain human behaviors.
Yeah.
And I think the only way around that is to do real work, right? If there's something about yourself you don't like, you have to work hard to change that, right? So I think when we combine these psychedelics with hard work, I think we're going to see great results. And no, I don't recommend people just take them willy-nilly on the weekends. I think that there is a dangerous side to that. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. It's like, I'm helping. It's like,
Yeah.
no, not really. Well, I actually interviewed a girl a little while back. She was diagnosed with narcissism,
Yeah.
and she actually has PTSD from a trip that she had, and she
Yeah.
called it an ego death. Have you heard this term?
Yeah. Yes. 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 Yes.
I'm still not 100% sure I understand what it is, but and now she's like, yeah, she swore up and down, but she's still using them in smaller doses and stuff to help with her. And I'm like,
Well,
she
that's the
swears like
idea.
I'm cured. Well, no, well you're using psychedelics all the time. That's not a
Yeah,
cure of anything.
that's not a cure. Yeah, the idea of the ego death is kind of a trippy one when it was explained to me, but this idea that the human is like the ego is a large part of who we are in our existence and how we kind of perceive the world. So when the ego dies, it's almost like you can surrender the human body and see kind of that astral world differently. I have a funny, I mean, I think it's funny, maybe it's not that funny, but I always tell people, when people tell me shit like that, I go, listen, can you now levitate? And they're like, no. I said, well, then you wasted my time. Because if you came back to this earth and you're still viewing everything the way I do, which is this is a desk and that's a wall, even though I understand that could be a projection of my consciousness,
Hmm.
unless I turn into a Jedi, it has no effect. It doesn't change anything, right? So we're kind of back to square one. I think it's a good idea, great thought. She surrendered her ego. That's wonderful. She saw the world differently. But like you said, she's now still taking psychedelics regularly. That feeling only lasted so long, right? And now she's back to default human behavior, viewing the world in a kind of default human way. I think that the better route, for example, I really believe the things that the monks do is similar to what effect we have when we use psychedelics in the brain. I think the way that they can surrender their body and kind of go outside of that space and do all these trippy things through 20 years of meditation, I think that's much better for you, right? Because when a monk looks at a tree, he appreciates the tree. My buddy takes mushrooms, he appreciates the tree, right? The sweet spot is to be a place where you're not taking anything and appreciating the tree. But that takes hard work, right? 20 years for the monk to get to that place. And as a human, we need to do work to get there. So when you combine the psychedelic with the work, I think you can kind of find that happy medium. But if you believe that just by taking psychedelics, you're going to be a better person, you might have some cool outlooks. You might have some different perspective on how you view yourself and life around you. Again, you're not going to levitate. You're not turning into a Jedi tomorrow. So there is no real, like, it's not changing anything. And now you're looking forward to the next trip.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the thing exactly right there. Yeah. It's like it feels awesome, but now I'm human again. So now I want to feel awesome again. So then it's like
Exactly.
that's exactly what drugs are. That's what addiction is. And yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, you take heroin. Yeah, it's not a psychedelic effect, but yeah, there is an effect on the body that feels amazing, and it's outside of who you are, and so you chase that. And I think you look at ayahuasca's big on this, right? So
yeah.
ayahuasca and ibogaine are huge on this spiritual journey because if you look at any of the accounts that people have had while on it, they talk about this journey they took.
Hmm.
And so some people, that journey was enough to get them to stop using heroin because there was this woman, this is common, this woman takes you and shows you things. And part of what she shows you is hell or this really dark place where you end up if you stay on the trajectory you're on, and then shows you this other thing, which is love. The beauty about the love part of it is that it gives you hope, right? And that hope, when you come back, that's something because most people in heavy addiction, they've lost that hope. I was just talking to a girl the other day, and she's like, "Look, if I don't stop using drugs, I'm gonna die." And she just relapsed a week ago. She can't. It's just she knows that she's on this trajectory. She's losing hope and can't feel or see a world where she's sober and things are great. And so I think that that again is what it's going to help with is getting that feeling of love. If you saw, there's a good documentary on DMT about a guy who didn't use anything, was recording other people using DMT, and then decided to do it himself. Then he waited 1 year. I'll think of the name eventually. He waited 1 year to then recount what he felt. He said he felt, and he believes he met God, which was this overwhelming feeling of love,
Hmm.
this essence of love that cannot be explained, right? And I think that's huge for people, especially people who are struggling with early childhood trauma, or I think most people want to feel loved, right? And to some extent, everyone has had some or none or whatever. But when you look at people in addiction, a lot of them are struggling with that lack of love. That they don't have any of that. And I think that loses hope because they see the world in the darkest way possible, right? My childhood, when I look back, there were moments that were weird, but moments that were amazing. Some of these kids, when I read the biopsychs, which is kind of our rundown of their past, fuck, man, I don't know how they wake up every day. I'll be honest with you. I'm blown away. I look at them and I go, you have to understand how incredibly tough you are, that you still wake up every day and put your fucking pants on and function. Yeah, okay, fine. You're using heroin here and there, right? I get that, right? But shit, man, your life was horrendous.
Hmm.
And so I think that's what something like ayahuasca can do. The bad part is that the ayahuasca trips can't be controlled. Once you're in it, you're there. And whatever it is, it is. I know there are a lot of people. You can go online right now on YouTube, don't take ayahuasca, and you'll hear people recount their experiences, and it's horrendous,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Not to mention we have to deal with the vomiting you do for a while before you actually go into the trip. I mean, it, can it help people on heroin? Yeah, sure, but I'm really hoping that MDMA and psilocybin do that without that extra. Again, do I think it would be great for people to take a spiritual journey? Yes. Do I think you need to be on ayahuasca to take a spiritual journey? No, I
Hmm.
don't.
Hmm.
I spent most of my life on journeys in my mind, asking questions of the universe and getting answers, right? If I'm, scientists say this all the time, you're made up of the exact same things that makes up, the background behind me.
Yeah.
Well, then if that's true,
For those
then
of
I
you
can,
listening, he has the universe behind him.
yeah, my background is the universe. Um, you're made up of what makes up the stars and the sky and everything else. And if that's true, then maybe there is a connection between all of us and everything else. So then maybe if I begin to spend time in meditation and searching, maybe I can find some of the answers, right? But again, if you're feeling immediate issues, you're not going to have the time to sit and meditate on that concept. So that's where I think that the psychedelics are going to help. It's going to give you immediate relief from the shit you went through, and it's going to give your body a chance to relax. And that will hopefully lead to you taking a spiritual journey drug free, because the mind is incredible. I mean, on our own through meditation we can take journeys that are out of our bodies if we wanted to, if we just spend enough time trying. So I think that people need to understand that the psychedelic again is a tool in Batman's tool belt, right? And that's it. It's going to revolutionize the way we do therapy, and that's incredible because therapy hasn't changed since Freud did it. But it's still just going to be one piece of a larger puzzle of you trying to solve, how do I human properly,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That's it. We're all trying to figure out how to human properly, and hopefully we don't like mess up other people's human stuff, and we're okay. We're all trying to figure that shit out, right? We're spiritual beings in a body trying to figure stuff out, and I think that once we can kind of take care of the trauma, which the therapy with the psychedelics will help with, we can then kind of take these fun spiritual journeys on our own, drug free, by just allowing our mind to open up and say, okay, I'm curious about this, and then ponder on it for a week or two, and then maybe an answer will just materialize. I mean, that's happened to me. I've come up with pretty cool thoughts that I think I've read like people who spent years studying things, like 10 years, and I didn't even know about their work. And then I come up with this idea, and then I look it up, and it turns out, oh yeah, this was a thing. People came 10 years studying this. There's an ether that is just kind of flowing, and we can draw from that. And I think that's where you see a lot of creativity come from. I think musicians, artists all draw from this collective consciousness, you know? It's the same way a mother wakes up at 3 a.m. and knows that her kid might have died in a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
That's this. I knew a mom who told me, I woke up at 2 a.m. I woke my husband up because I knew something happened to my son. Sure as shit. She called. She gets a call from the police. Her son passed away in a car accident.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is that?
Yeah.
Right? There is a collective consciousness, and I think that the problem is that when you're dealing with immediate issues in your life, like substance abuse issues, mental health issues, which they're all mental health issues, but
Right.
early childhood traumas or just physical feelings like we talked about of not feeling okay but not knowing why, well, you don't have time to think about all that extra shit. You don't care that the tree is beautiful and that it's been here for 300 years, which is an incredible thing. But what the hell do I care? You know what I mean?
Thank you so much for that, Mark. I very much appreciated that conversation. We actually broed out for a good while there, and I'm never gonna forget that conversation. And I really hope we stay in touch, and I get to talk to you again sometime. Now, if you would like to leave a comment or a question or anything like that, please feel free to follow me on Instagram at Bunny Hugs Podcast, and on TikTok, Bunny Hugs Podcast, and on Facebook at Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. I do post reels and memes and all types of mental health goodies, and a lot more ADHD stuff lately since I've been diagnosed. One more thing I would love for you to do is rate and review the podcast on Apple. That would be huge. It really means a lot to podcasters to get ratings and reviews. It really, I can't explain how much it helps. So thank you. Don't forget, next week I'm speaking with Desiree, another wonderful person. She has head trauma, and she has some PTSD and some physical trauma as well from a car accident that she survived, a horrific car accident. And she's a real sweetheart. She's a 23-year-old girl and just wonderful. So I very much want you to listen to that podcast as well. And again, if you're in Indian Head, Saskatchewan, on January 13th, please come down to the Grand Theater, and I will be recording a live episode with Big Daddy Taz. I've spoke to him before in the past on the podcast. He's a stand-up comedian, and we're going to talk about mental health stuff. I believe it's in the afternoon. I can't remember what time, but come on down and check it out. I think it might even be free. Again, I don't know. But anyway, also I'm in Regina, Saskatchewan at the Center of the Arts. No, Connexus Art Center. That's the old name. It's now the Connexus Art Center. And it's for an event called More Joy Regina. That's January 25th. Go just Google More Joy Regina, January 25th, and get tickets there if you'd like to. And another thing I would like for you to do is make your beds and to take your meds. Bye.